It's the 16th of December. Here is today's update on what's going on in the war in Ukraine. In the north, around Kupiansk, the Russians tried to advance in a place called Sinivka with catastrophic losses, is the description. Also in Kremina, which is a little bit further south in the forests around Kremina, the Russians also tried to advance, suffering losses, catastrophic or otherwise. And then in Bakhmut, where the Russians have been trying to gain back the territory that they lost in the counteroffensive, to no success. They don't seem to be gaining any traction there, and it's just very hard. The weather is very rainy, very snowy. It's dark. It's the fighting conditions are horrible. The trenches are horrible, so they're not going to be able to advance there. In Avdiivka, the Russians have been fucking throwing men at the Ukrainian defensive lines, and that has been continuous almost for 2 months or something, or more, 3. And it's absolutely catastrophic for the Russians. They're sending 80 attack groups per day of 20 guys, 80, which is insane. And each of those groups are either not supported or supported by infantry fighting vehicles like BMPs or something like that, or tanks. But very often they're dismounted. They're just literally running up against machine gun fire. They are successful as of yet in very little increments. But those little increments start to count. Like, we can't think about Avdiivka or the war in general. It's just gone. For me, it's almost a moot point, casualties or equipment losses. It is not a measurement of anything anymore, because the Russians just have shown that they're just willing to throw as many men and equipment at a problem until it's fixed. That's just the grim reality of this war, because they are losing, tens of thousands of killed in action in Avdiivka, but they just don't care. And they are, like I said, they are through the industrial area in the southeast. That's just it's a very small part, but it's still, it's enough. In the end, it will be enough to take over the city. In a city called Marinka, which is not even a city anymore, it's like a former city. The Russians and Ukrainians are still fighting. It is a city that is complete ruins. There's nothing left. Like in Bakhmut, at least there are, walls. But in Marinka, there's nothing. There's absolutely nothing. There's a city that has been wiped off the face of the earth. And the Ukrainians are still holding on to a portion of it. And it just made me think about, we haven't actually been to any of, there are a few of these places like Marinka in the war in Ukraine now that are under Russian control. We haven't been able to have access, meaning as journalists, since Bakhmut, pretty much. Like Bakhmut, while they were still fighting over Bakhmut, and honestly, we weren't even I was there in January, and the fighting, the city wasn't completely put in ruins until, a couple months later. I mean, it was ruined, but we haven't seen an extent of damage as we are seeing in Marinka, from drone footage and all that stuff. Like journalists, we can't go to Marinka, and we can't go to Bakhmut, and we can't go to Severodonetsk. We can't go to all these places. And it just makes me think, because I don't know, the level of devastation I saw in a place called Posad Pokrovsky, that's the most ruined place I've seen. But, these places are everywhere in Ukraine right now, and we just don't have any access to them. It's just, food for thought. The last place on the map we are looking at, it's the south. So there is two axes that were part of the counteroffensive, with the Velika Novosilka axis and then Orikhiv axis. They are pretty much just frozen, to be, lack of a better word, meaning as in the line is frozen. There's still heavy fighting going on, but the line is pretty much frozen. The only kind of really active point to be looking at, even though they are important, the other ones, but is the Kherson across the river point. The Ukrainians are still holding the ground there with a few hundred soldiers. They're killing a bunch of Russians. I don't know what it will amount to, but we'll see.